Hi everyone, here's what's bothering me today. My rant about Columbus inspired me to also make this rant about other abuses that the Spanish crowns had made in Latin America that not enough people know about or appreciate, that also explain at least partly why things are so messed up and why there's such a wealth imbalance in Latin America to this day. So for starters, let's just get the latifundia system out of the way. This was originally a Roman system, but it kind of persisted in various forms throughout Europe, especially in Spain during the Reconquista. After the Reconquista, what happened is when America starts exploring, well, not exploring, but like exploring and colonizing the Western Hemisphere, they realize there's a whole bunch of land here and they need to be able to start exploiting it because they found all this wealth. Here come the terrible systems. So for starters, under like Columbus and Cortez and all these other guys, the first systems that you start to see are called the Hacienda system and the Encomienda. Now, the Hacienda system, which was led by, the people who were in charge called hacendados, these guys were basically awarded these massive land grants away from settlements, or sometimes in the start of new settlements that contained like hundreds, if not sometimes thousands of acres. For example, I think one of Cortez's haciendas was basically over the entire state of, or the entire valley of Oaxaca in Mexico. These were big. So what happens? You have all this land, right? You need people to work it. But unfortunately, disease is ravaging a lot of the native population. But there's still what you basically have at this point in time. This is where the Encomienda system comes in. The Encomienda was this really brutal system of, we can call it indentured servitude, but it was basically akin to slavery because the conquistadors didn't see the indigenous people as people. So this was basically a system of forced labor in exchange for protection. This is what led to the hacendados in South America literally mining mountains of silver. And if the borderline slaved indigenous people didn't reach their quotas, oh, there go your hands. Not even making this up. So you have all this forced labor, which then, again, with the transatlantic slave trade, bringing in even more people to work on sugar plantations, cocoa plantations, oil plantations, rubber plantations, agave plantations, all the wealth in mines, lumber, all the wealth from this corner of the world was being extracted through borderline slave and actual slave labor, and it all went concentrated into the handful of the Criollo elite, the White Colonials, who are sometimes called what was the term they used? Peninsulares, saying that they came actually from the peninsula of Spain, and if you were a white Criollo, you were like a white person born and raised in these newly conquered lands. Power and wealth immediately accrued to these people based on their exploitation of indigenous groups and also imported African slave labor. So the haciendas were basically these massive plantations or factories or massive mansions where people would live in, and then they would have all their land out somewhere, and that would be their country home or whatever. And they were producing all the kinds of cash crops that were desirable back in Europe. Coffee, sugar, chocolate, rubber, gold, silver, and they're making money hand over fist, and it's concentrated in a tiny percentage of the population. And so, sure enough, later on, when it comes time to rise up in the Latin American Wars of Independence, it is these people who have the money and the power and the influence to decide where they fall one way or the other. And that's why, again, in the wake of Latin American independence from Spain, you see just terrible dictator after terrible dictator, because power was so concentrated in there, because there was never a true spreading of that wealth to any kind of equitable system, because the system that was imported from Spain and from an ancient time, that was entrenched in Latin America, and it has been that way for centuries. This is why the wealth disparity, especially between many of the races in Latin America, is so vast. It all can trace itself back to this horrifying period that not enough people know about or appreciate. The latifundia, which also granted land tracts to Catholic missionaries so that they could further erase the religions and culture and language and history of the indigenous peoples of Latin America. The Hacendado system that just concentrated wealth in a handful of corrupt pockets. The Encomienda, which was basically a form of slavery with a few extra steps. These three systems all came together to utterly decimate the existing infrastructure and native cultures and languages and societies and organizations. And all three of these played a part in the wars of independence in Latin America. And they also play a part in why Latin America has some of the problems that it has to this day. And yet not enough people realize that or appreciate that. And that's what's bothering me today.